The world of video games today is absolutely obsessed with sequels. We are literally tripping over new additions to franchises such as FIFA, Call of Duty, Need for Speed, and Assassin's Creed. Many even argue that sequelitis is killing the industry altogether and stifling creativity with the big publishers. But for every video game franchise that has long outstayed its welcome, there is another that is still begging for attention. So this episode, we take a look at these trash trinities, these severed sets, and these truncated trios that all disappeared quicker than Peter Molyneux's hairline. But, hello you, I'm Guru Larry, and I welcome you to Fact Hunt. 5 famous video game trilogies that were never completed. We'll start today's episode with the first of the 2 most infamous untrilogied trilogies in gaming, Mega Man Legends. Now, the original Mega Man games from Capcom were classic 2D platformer shooters, featuring a cool lead character, inventive combat mechanics, and Gutsman over and over. The original Mega Man is still regarded as a landmark title to this day, and even went on to spawn countless sequels. But with the emergence of 3D graphics in the mid-90s, Capcom decided that they needed to expand the Mega Man universe by creating a new series of games to take advantage of these graphical innovations. Mega Man Legends not only brought the character into the 3rd dimension, but also provided him with dialogue, companions, and at last, a proper plot. After being very well received by critics, Mega Man Legends quickly spawned a sequel and a spin-off, so a 3rd game seemed inevitable. But bizarrely, it just never came to be. Then finally, in 2010, some 13 years after the original game, Capcom finally announced the news that fans had been waiting for. Mega Man Legends 3 was coming to the Nintendo 3DS. So why is this entry here then, Larry, I hear you ask? Well, it never bloody came out, did it? A year later, Capcom informed the world that the project simply hadn't lived up to their own internal expectations, and with that, Mega Man Legends 3 was officially cancelled. Since then, radio silence has resumed with Capcom, who were more than happy to pump out endless remakes of Resident Evil and Street Fighter 2 instead. They have recently announced some more 2D Mega Man games though, so there's always hope with this one, but this is Capcom we're talking about here. You know, the silver medalist Konami. For this next entry, we're travelling back in time to one of the biggest games of 1982. Big 5 Software's Miner 49er was huge! And I mean really huge. It had taken a formula that had been popularised with Donkey Kong and took platform games to the next level, adding more stages, collectible items, intelligent enemies, and an instantly recognisable character. It won pretty much every award out there at the time, and after first appearing on the Atari 8-bit computers, the game ended up being converted to just about every system under the sun. In fact, Miner 2049er remains one of the most officially ported games of all time. 2 years later, a sequel finally arrived in the guise of the excellent Bounty Bob Strikes Back. As good as this game was though, it didn't stop with people wondering why it took so long to come out. Especially when Big 5 had promised a follow-up the year before in the form of Scraper Caper, which was wildly advertised and talked about in the press before being quietly cancelled. So, what became of Scraper Caper? And why did we never get a Bounty Bob trilogy? Well, it's all because the programmer and creator Bill Hogue was a perfectionist and just wasn't happy with what he had come up with. So rather than release a substandard game, he just cancelled it altogether. It's nice to know that there are some people out there in the games industry who still have an ounce of self-respect. Mentioning no names. The next entry is one for my fellow Brits, as we revisit the phenomenon that was Jet Set Willy. The story starts in 1983 with the arrival of Manic Miner on the ZX Spectrum. Before this time, all the biggest video games had come from Japan or America, with conversions and clones of arcade titles dominating the charts. Then Matthew Smith introduced the world to Minor Willy, a true British hero that had actually been inspired by the previous entry on this list, Minor 2049er. But this was not the only source of material, as Matthew was also enamoured by the work of fellow British institution Monty Python. This was clear to see in both Manic Miner and the sequel Jet Set Willy, as Minor Willy encountered no end of weird and wonderful characters. However, as big as Manic Miner was, Jet Set Willy was even bigger. Arriving just a year afterwards, it expanded greatly on the previous game with a vast mansion of different rooms which were all interlinked and could be completed in any order. A huge departure from the linear nature of the original. The game instantly reached number 1 in the Spectrum charts and stayed there for several months. But it wasn't long before talk of another sequel emerged. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that Jet Set Willy 2 was a sequel and the third game in the series. But actually, it was nothing more than an update to the original Jet Set Willy that fixed a few game-breaking glitches, tweaked the gameplay, and added a few more rooms. This game would go on to be ported to other platforms as Jet Set Willy: The Final Frontier. Matthew Smith wasn't even involved with this edition either. It was adapted by fellow Software Projects employee Derek P. Rosen. So, what of the game that Smith was promising everybody? Well, Minor Willy Meets the Taxman was supposed to be the third and final game in the trilogy. The plot was that after all his financial gains, it was discovered that Willy had been cheating the government out of their share, so they had sent the Taxman in to investigate. Not much else is known about the game, other than it was apparently going to contain time travel elements, and it would have been the biggest platformer on the Specky yet. So, how did this trilogy collapse? Well, a burnt-out Matthew Smith disappeared almost overnight into a seedy world of drugs and debauchery that pretty much left him ruined. But that's a story for another clickbait episode. Come on, I'd be drowned in "actually you forgot" comments if I didn't bring up Half-Life here. And if it wasn't bad enough that Valve had deprived us of a third Portal game, they also want to insult us further by never delivering the third Half-Life game that people have been begging for since the groundbreaking second instalment first hit shelves in 2004. As cool and successful as the first game was, it's almost impossible to overstate the impact that Half-Life 2 has had on the industry and gamers everywhere. All in all, the game won no less than 39 Game of the Year awards and the title of Game of the Decade at the 2012 Spike Video Game Awards. It's also widely considered to be one of the greatest and most significant video games of all time. As of 2011, Half-Life 2 has sold over 12 million copies, making it one of the best-selling singular titles of all time. In fact, it's part of Steam's terms of service that if you don't own Half-Life 2 in your library, Gabe Newell will come round your house and sit on you. But since the release of Source and SDK, the Half-Life 2 engine has been used in countless more games, including Dystopia, Black Mesa, and the hugely popular create-your-own FPS kit, Gmod.
Hello?
So, after years and years of rumours, unofficial announcements, and more lies than Peter Molyneux's notebook, why are Valve still so resistant to making another Half-Life game? Well, Valve founder Gabe Newell decided that single-player games were old hat, and the future lied in multiplayer, such as Team Fortress 2, Counter-Strike, and Dota 2. Then again, he said the same thing about episodic content, and look where that led him. So, there we have it. Valve would rather cater to rowdy pubescent teens shouting obscenities at each other than give real gamers the title they so desperately crave. Thanks, Gabe. Dickhead. Now, there's a multitude of complicated reasons why all the other games on this list never had their trilogies completed. But when it comes to the case of Advent Rising, The answer is simple. It was an epic failure. So bad, in fact, that the publisher didn't just cancel the trilogy, they cancelled themselves. To say Advent Rising didn't live up to the hype is an understatement of gross proportions. In the months leading up to the game's release, the publishers, Majesco, were seemingly promising the world. The game would be billed as an immersive sci-fi epic on a Hollywood scale, and with writers such as Orson Scott Card of Ender's Game fame on board, a planned DC comic book series, and highly acclaimed composer Michael Richard Plowman helping to compose the soundtrack, it certainly sounded like that this was a game to get excited about. Majesco was so sure about the game's success that they announced it as a trilogy from day one, and even hinted at several possible spin-offs too. Advent Rising was released for the Xbox on May 31st, 2005, with a PC version following a few months later. However, the game was immediately lambasted by the majority of the gaming press for being a broken, buggy mess with strange visuals. But the pain didn't end there. Oh no siree. You see, Majesco had also offered $1 million in a contest via Xbox Live for the first player to find a set of hidden symbols spread throughout the game. However, it was found that security issues with Xbox Live's global time syncing created an unfair playing field for competitors, and the competition was promptly cancelled, with Majesco stingily offering out some free games for those who had already completed the contest instead. With disaster after disaster befalling Advent Rising and a big hole in their bank account, Majesco announced they were quitting the console business and would now concentrate on publishing mobile games instead. A fitting punishment. Advent Rising, the Mass Effect of the noughties. Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.